Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a phenomenon you have probably experienced countless times, but honestly might never have truly stopped to think about. Right now, as we speak, 500,000 cars are about to hit a literal wall of red on their navigation screens. And here's the crazy part, it's not because a crash just occurred, it's not because a stoplight suddenly went out somewhere. No, it's because servers have predicted, with an almost unsettling level of accuracy I might add, that in the next few minutes, hundreds of strangers who do not know each other, who aren't talking to each other, are all about to make the exact same decision at the exact same time. So the million-dollar question we need to solve right off the bat is this. How on earth does a piece of software know what thousands of independent, free-thinking human beings are going to do before they even do it? You know the feeling? You open your app, you check the route for a trip you're taking in, say, 40 minutes, and there's a big red patch on a road that is completely clear right now. The traffic jam literally hasn't happened yet. It's such a bizarre thought, right? A jam that doesn't exist is already plotted out on our screens. So how exactly is the software anticipating our every move?
Well, let's kick things off with Section 1, the traffic camera myth, subtitled Debunking the Eye in the Sky.
Now, if you asked around, most people just assume there's this massive, sprawling network of cameras everywhere counting cars. They picture government helicopters hovering over every major intersection, feeding live videos straight into some giant, top-secret server room where an algorithm just sits there watching the footage and tallying up the vehicles. It sounds cool, right? Like a fun spy movie. But honestly, automatically figuring out when a road is congested purely from a visual feed across over 200 countries is an incredibly difficult computer vision problem, which brings us to what's actually going on.
The really crucial point here is that cameras only cover a tiny fraction of the world's roads. They completely miss almost all residential streets, and honestly, most highways entirely. There simply is no camera network on Earth dense enough or vast enough to cover the sheer scale at which modern navigation apps have to operate. So if it isn't some all-seeing eye in the sky, what exactly is tracking all this traffic?
That brings us perfectly to Section 2. Your phone is the sensor, the live, moving dot. The true solution to this whole puzzle is probably sitting right in your pocket or, resting in your cup holder. Believe it or not, you are part of a sensor network larger than anything any government has ever built in history. Every single smartphone running a navigation app, or honestly, even just with location services toggled on in the background, is constantly, silently sending these little pings back to the servers every few seconds. It sends your anonymous GPS position, your exact speed, and your direction of travel. And this is happening constantly, whether you actively have the map open on your screen or not. This, folks, is the ultimate example of crowdsourced data in action. By bringing all these tiny signals together, the system doesn't need to mount a camera on every single street corner. Instead, it relies on live, moving data points from tens of millions of smartphones all at once. It essentially gives the system a live, glowing dot for practically every single car on the planet that happens to have a smartphone inside it. But the real magic here isn't just about counting cars. It's about measuring speed. Think about it. 10 cars cruising at 60 miles an hour look exactly the same as 10 cars crawling at 5 miles an hour if you're just counting heads. So the system built a speed profile for nearly every road on Earth. It watches for when a road's historical baseline, let's say a normal Tuesday afternoon where cars usually flow at 35 miles per hour, suddenly drops down to 12. It instantly uses that math to flag a jam without a single human eye ever having to look at the street. The speed dropped relative to history, therefore there's a delay right now. Simple, but incredibly effective. Let's move on to Section 3, predicting the future. Time travel and forecasting. Okay, so knowing a road is blocked right this very second is obviously super useful. But predicting a jam before it even happens? Now that is a completely different level of difficulty. And yet, that is exactly what your navigation apps are doing every day. By pulling from this massive archive of billions of trips, going back well over a decade, the system knows our incredibly specific human routines, rain or shine. It knows for a fact that a specific stretch of highway is going to absolutely flood with cars at 5:10 p.m. without fail. It knows the exit ramp near the stadium turns into a total nightmare exactly 1 hour before a 4:10 p.m. game. It even knows you. It learns that you reliably leave for work around 8:15 a.m., based entirely on your ping history. This machine has watched millions of humans commute again and again, and it's learned our patterns better than we consciously know them ourselves. A massive misconception out there is that traffic prediction just looks at whatever the current traffic is and assumes it's just going to stay that way. But we all know a traffic jam doesn't just sit there. It grows, it shifts, it eventually dissolves. What's actually happening behind your screen isn't just observation. It is forecasting. It's actually a lot like a meteorologist comparing current weather conditions against massive historical archives just to figure out where a storm is going to move next.
Which leads us to Section 4, Invisible Controlled Experiments, testing routes on millions of drivers. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is where things get just a little bit sneaky, but in a totally genius sort of way. Because this system doesn't just passively watch us commute. Oh no, it actively works to improve its own map by running experiments on us. Behind the scenes, the app deliberately routes portions of drivers onto slightly different paths, even when they're all heading to similar destinations. Why? To gather fresh data on unmonitored roads. It is actively running invisible, controlled experiments on millions of real, everyday commuters. Every driver who takes that slightly different alternate route basically becomes a live data point, testing to see if that path happens to be faster or slower today. This whole operation relies heavily on what engineers call the wisdom of the crowd. Look, a single car slowing down means absolutely nothing. Someone might have just pulled over to grab a coffee, or maybe they're checking a text message. But when hundreds of independent phones all behave the exact same way, all slowing down in unison in the exact same location, well, that reveals a verified traffic event. Those individual random data points suddenly become statistically meaningful patterns. Let's wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this in Section 5, a planetary nervous system, bringing the inputs together. So that single red line you casually glance at on your screen, that is generated in under a second by layering a truly enormous process. First, it grabs real-time smartphone speeds. Then it mixes those with years, literally years, of historical patterns. It layers all this into a predictive model using neural network architecture, which is actually inspired by how our own brains process sequences. It watches traffic less like a static photograph and more like a movie, trying to predict the very next scene. Then it layers in external event calendars, government road construction reports, and live human user reports. People physically tapping icons to flag accidents. All of that is compressed and delivered right to your dashboard, instantly. When you really sit back and think about it, you are acting as an unwitting sensor in what is basically a planetary scale nervous system. Every single trip you take, every red light you get stuck at, every backup you endure, it all becomes training data. You are invisibly cooperating with millions of strangers you will never ever meet just to make travel predictable. Like the quote says, individually, your data is just noise. But collectively, it's practically prophecy. Which leaves us with this final, kind of strange philosophical thought to sit with the next time you try to outsmart your navigation app. If a system can already predict with this level of pinpoint precision what an entire city of strangers is about to do, how much of what feels like your own spontaneous free-willed decision on the road today was actually written into a predictable mathematical pattern long before you even walked out your front door? It is definitely something to chew on during your next commute. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.